Hey folks, what do you do when your favorite book prize has two long lists within the same year? Not even just within the same year, like two long lists at the exact same time. That's happening to me right now because the Republic of Consciousness Prize, which is a prize that celebrates fiction published by small presses, has both a US and Canada long list and a UK long list that have just been announced within a week of each other. Because I live in the US, I have already purchased the US and Canada long list. I've even numbered them. If you can see on the spines, I've numbered them in the order I need to read them in. But then last week, the UK arm of the Republic of Consciousness Prize, which was of course the original Republic of Consciousness Prize, announced their long list. And it looks so incredible that I am already experiencing FOMO. Which is rare for me with book prizes, but it's happening. So I am here to tell you about those 10 books on the UK Republic of Consciousness Prize long list. That is quite a mouthful. I'm here to tell you about those 10 books so that hopefully you can read them or some of them and then tell me which ones I should read. The point of the Republic of Consciousness Prize is to celebrate publishers and small publishers, to be exact, who are striving to release into the world works of high literary merit, but are also often taking financial risks in order to do so. So as I go through this list, I'm also going to tell you about one other book from each publisher's catalog that kind of jumped out to me. Because again, this prize is not just about the individual book that's on the long list, but it's about the publisher and about helping fund publishers so that they can continue to build their catalog and fill it with works of high literary merit that might be a financial risk. So to be true to the spirit of the prize, I want to show you a little bit about kind of what each publisher is about and get a little taste beyond what's just on the long list, because these are some really, really cool, often very niche publishers. I think you'll really love learning more about them. A couple of weeks ago, I told you a bit about the US and Canada Republic of Consciousness Prize and included a bit about what their criteria are for accepting nominations from small presses. The criteria for the UK prize is a little bit different, and has changed over the years. So this year, the criteria for a small publisher to submit a book to be considered for the Republic of Consciousness Prize, the small press had to have published 12 or fewer books within a year. The publisher also has to be an independent financial body, which is the same is true for the US and Canada prize. And so that means it cannot be wholly or partly owned by another business or financial body. So they have to be completely independent. I have just a tiny few stats to share with you about this year's UK Republic of Consciousness long list. So this year there are 10 books on the long list. It sounds like this year the judges wanted to put through 13 books for the long list, but we're not allowed to do so. They had to pick 10, and I would love to know what those 3 remaining books were that were left off the long list. There are a whopping 7 books on this long list that are translated into English. Compare that to the US and Canada prize, which has 4 books that have been translated into English on that prize. There are 7 novels on the UK long list and 3 collections of short stories. So compare that to the US and Canada list. This year there are actually 9 novels and 1 short story collection. Last year there were a lot more short story collections on the US and Canada list, and I just think it's interesting to see how these long lists change from year to year. Okay, let's get into that long list. I'm gonna grab my notes. So I'm just gonna give a real quick blurb about each book, and I highly encourage you to look them up for more details. There are 2 great resources out there for you right here on YouTube. You can go visit Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot and Anna Marie at Actual Spinster for some amazing videos about this UK Republic of Consciousness Prize long list. And I will link their videos below. So first up, we have Out of Earth by Sheyla Smanioto, and this is translated by Laura Garmeson and Sophie Lewis. and this is from Boiler House Press. And this is a Brazilian novel following 4 generations of female characters in the Sertão, which is a semi-arid region in northeastern Brazil that I am 100% sure is not pronounced Sertão. But this is described as groundbreaking, feminist, a modernist fable, and formally reminiscent of Amor McBride's A Girl is a Half-Formed Thing. So the Boiler House Press is based at the University of East Anglia, and they say about themselves, "We are passionate about writing that breaks a mold. We want to open and excite your mind. We understand the word publishing in its broadest sense, that a book is, in essence, a packaged idea, that publishing is a process through which ideas reach people and change happens." And another book that they've published that kind of stood out to me is a book called No More Giants by Joaquina Ballard Howells. And this book, in the description, it says that it was ignored when it was first published. And it says, "No More Giants is now recognized as a classic work about women in the American West. It's a gripping story of a young woman growing up in the harsh setting of a Nevada ranch in the 1940s. Next up, we have Avenues by Train by Farai Mudzingwa, and this is from Cassava Republic. And this is described as a novel that's set in Zimbabwe, and it spans a period of several decades, and it follows Jedza, who in his mid-20s is convinced that he is haunted by a traumatic incident from his childhood. And through Jedza, the novel also tells a story of Zimbabwe and how its spirituality has been impacted by colonization, and how Zimbabwe's ancestral culture kind of butts up against a modernity that is defined by corruption and economic collapse. And this is described as an eclectic and experimental debut novel. And Cassava Republic Press was established in 2006 in Nigeria and then launched a branch in the UK in 2016. And they publish across all genres. So they have literary fiction, they have crime, they have nonfiction, they have children's books, they have romance. They publish a bit of everything. And they say, "We aim to change the way the world thinks about African writing. We think that contemporary African prose should be rooted in the African experience in all its diversity." So to share another book from Cassava Republic, I picked this one mostly because of its title. It's Like a Mule Bringing Ice Cream to the Sun, and it's by Sarah Ladipo Manika. And this is a story of a vibrant, lively 75-year-old Nigerian woman who's living in San Francisco. And she has a fall. She falls, and her independent life basically crumbles. And so she has to rely on both friends and chance encounters to really get by. And it sounds like one of those books that has a really great, quirky cast of characters. And it says it's a story about aging, friendship, and loss, and a nuanced study of the erotic yearnings of an older woman. Next up, we have one of the only books that I was already aware of on the UK Republic of Consciousness long list. So obviously I need to do a much better job of following UK small presses. So this is called Of Cattle and Men, and the author is Anna Paula Maia, and the translator is Zoe Perry. And this is from Charco Press. This is set in a slaughterhouse in an isolated corner of Brazil, and it follows Edgar, who is the stun operator in said slaughterhouse. And it is Edgar's job to strike each cow with a mallet in order to knock it unconscious before it is killed. However, the cattle have recently become strangely unsettled, and they're running into walls and running off cliffs. This is described by the prize judges as a stunning thriller of sorts. Charco means puddle in Spanish, and it's a colloquialism in some countries to say that call the Atlantic Ocean a puddle. And so to cross the puddle is to cross the Atlantic Ocean. Charco Press, their mission is to bring outstanding contemporary Latin American literature across the puddle to new readers in the English-speaking world. So another book, I have so many Charco Press books, but there are many options to share, but let's go with another Brazilian book, an upcoming release. The title is The Dark Side of Skin, and it's by Jefferson Tenorio, and it's translated by Bruna Dantas Lobato. It takes place in Brazil, and it strips bare the pervasive racism and violence of Brazilian society through the story of one character, Pedro, whose father has been murdered, and Pedro embarks on kind of a journey to investigate and trace his family trajectory through the streets of the city where he lives, Porto Alegre. From Cipher Press is one of the short story collections. It's called Truth and Dare, and it's by Sophie Maia, and this is a debut fiction collection that's described as deeply personal and a fantastical ride through gender, trauma, queerness, science, history, and religion. And one of the judges described the stories as cheeky, playful, weird, and wonderful. Some of the descriptions say that the stories blend memoir with science fiction. And I think that sounds amazing. So Cipher Press is an independent publisher of queer fiction and nonfiction. And they say, our aim is to amplify queer voices and to champion LGBTQIA+ writers in the UK and beyond. And they say, we want to publish authors who are creating a new literary canon by disrupting existing narratives and retelling them in new ways. Also love to note that they're entirely queer owned and run because, as they say, we want the publishing industry to be more inclusive at every level. We still don't often see the kinds of books we want to see on shelves, and we'd like to change that by finding authors who excite us and by publishing books that we love. So another book from Cipher Press, there are several books that have made their way around BookTube from Cipher Press, including Nettle Black, Tell Me I'm Worthless, and Brainworms. And one that caught my eye is Liri Boto by Ayodele Olofintuad. And this is a twisty thriller about the fate of a sprawling family in Lagos. And it's a queer feminist revenge thriller like no other, in which murder, betrayal, and witchcraft collide with explosive results. From a publisher called Fum de Stampa Press is a novel called Summa Kaotica, and it's by Ventura Ametller, and it's translated by Douglas Suttle. There are many things that I am sure I mispronounced in those last 15 seconds. I believe this was originally published in the 1980s, though it's kind of hard to find that for sure. This is the story of a young boy who lives through the outbreak of the Spanish Civil War. And the book is considered one of the most groundbreaking works written in Catalan. And it blends fact and fiction in daring prose, as it says, and it depicts some of the most important events of the 20th century. So Fum de Stampa Press was founded in 2020 by translator Douglas Suttle, specifically to bring Catalan language literature to an English-speaking audience. And recently they've started to publish literature in translation from other languages as well, but it was originally founded to focus on Catalan literature. And another book that was just published in January is called Through the Forest by Laura Alcoba, and it's translated by Martin Monroe. And this is a story that sounds pretty intense. It's about an Argentinian woman who is living in exile in France, who drowns two of her children in the 1980s. 30 years later, the narrator of this book is tracking down the surviving members of that family to really delve into their story and try to understand what happened. From Jantar Publishing is a book of short stories called Barcode, and this is by Krisztina Toth, and it's translated by Peter Sherwood. And this is the author's first substantial work in prose after publishing 4 volumes of poetry. And there are 15 stories translated from Hungarian, and most are from the point of view of young, unnamed female narrators. And they're described as stories that are like jewels strung from a necklace, and they're all set during the declining years of Hungary's socialist era. Jantar is an independent publisher of European literary fiction and poetry based in London, and they were founded in 2011, originally to publish previously inaccessible works of Central European literary fiction, but they've since expanded to include a wider range of European literary works. And the word Jantar means amber, I think in Ukrainian, but they also explained that there are similar words in many other languages that mean amber. And so the idea is that these works that they're publishing have been stuck in amber, and as I say, awaiting release or discovery through translation. And I assume that means at least to an English-speaking audience, because presumably they aren't stuck in amber for the people who do speak those languages that the books were written in. But super cool. I love the name of the press and the story behind it. So another book that they have published is called The Science of the Stars, and it's by Gustav Russ, translated from the original Slovak by David Short. And this was written way back in 1856, and it is the memoirs of a country gentleman who builds a balloon to fly to the moon only to crash in Egypt, but he doesn't give up. He builds another flying machine, this time powered by gunpowder, and sets off again to explore the solar system. And it says that this was the first ever science fiction novel written in Slovak. Next up is a novel, a novella, I believe, called May the Tigress Grieve for You. And it's by Emilienne Malfatto, and it's translated by Lorna Scott Fox. And the publisher is Les Fugitives. And this is set in rural Iraq. And it's a story of a young girl who becomes pregnant out of wedlock, and that, it says, seals her fate. And the story is told through voices of family members and also includes fragments from the Epic of Gilgamesh, as well as a mythical voice that is the Tigris River. And it's described as beautiful, shocking, poetic, uncompromising, and a look at a world in which life matters less than honor. And about the press, it was founded in 2014 by a French translator working and living in London, and they publish only short books by award-winning Francophone female authors who have not yet been translated into English. So you got that? They publish only short books by award-winning Francophone female authors who have not yet been translated into English. So super niche, but so cool. On their website, a lot of their books are sold out, but I think you can get them elsewhere. But I didn't want to list a book that was sold out on their website. So this one was not sold out, and it stood out. It's called The Child Who by Jean Benamur, and it's translated by Bill Johnston. And it says that it takes place in an unnamed French village set during an unnamed time, and a child wanders in a forest where his mother may have disappeared. His father is speechless with anger, and his grandmother has secrets of her own. And the story is told in second person, and I believe the narrator is addressing the child. Next up, one of the other few books that I was already aware of, called My Work by Olga Ravn, and it's translated by Sophia Hersey-Smith and Jennifer Russell. And this is published in the UK by Lolly Editions. And this is the story of a woman, Anna, who moves to an unfamiliar city, I believe Stockholm, shortly after giving birth, and struggles against depression by forcing herself to read and write. And Lolly Editions is an independent publisher based in London who publishes radical and formally inventive fiction that challenges existing ideas and breathes new life into the novel form. And another book they have coming out soon is called All Is Here Now, and it's by Anna Stern, and it's translated by Damien Searles. And this is the winner of the Swiss Book Prize, and it's described as the haunting and intimate account of a group of young adults trying to come to terms with a young friend's premature death. And when the friends can no longer handle the absence of their deceased friend, they go on a road trip to dig up their dead friend's ashes. And it says that the novel flouts gender pronouns and is written without any capitalization, I think, is what it said. From Scotland Street Press is a book called The Zicameron, and it's by Maxim Znak, and it's translated by Jim and Ella Dingley. These are 100 tales full of dry humor and irony based on the 14th century Decameron, charting 100 days in prison in Belarus. And Znak, the author, wrote these stories from prison in Belarus. And they found their way to the translator of this book, Jim Dingley, the translator then sent them to Scotland Street Press. There was some question about whether publishing them would endanger the author's life in prison, but the author's wife and sister encouraged the publisher to move forward. And so that's just absolutely fascinating. The press, Scotland Street Press, is a small but mighty publisher based in Edinburgh, and they publish interesting, varied, challenging voices who have good stories to tell, and in doing so bring Scotland into an international conversation. And another book that stood out to me is another collection of short stories called Sea Fret, and it's by Dilys Rose. It describes a couple of the stories here by saying, 2 traveling musicians attempt to come to terms with a nightmare scenario at home. Restless teenagers run riot during lockdown with drastic consequences. Albert Einstein's reputation grows, as does his absence as a father. And a cantankerous 99-year-old contributes to the chaos of a night ward. And I have to admit that that's the one that caught me. And the author, Rose, has been compared to Catherine Mansfield. And finally on the long list is The End of August, the third and final book that I already knew about from this long list. This is by Yu Miri, and it's translated by Morgan Giles, and it's from Tilted Axis Press. And this is a semi-autobiographical story. From what I understand, this is a massive, chunky book. And it explores the experiences of second and third generation Koreans living in Japan. Spanning decades, it begins in 1930s Japanese-occupied Korea and follows a running prodigy who's preparing for the upcoming Tokyo Olympics, and then spans all the way up to nearly a century later when this runner's granddaughter, who is living in Japan, is training for a marathon, and she tries to summon the spirit of her grandfather in preparation for this marathon and immerses herself in the process in the painful histories of her family. And Tilted Axis Press was founded in 2015 and focuses mostly on the work of Asian and African writers translated into English. One thing I love about them is that on their website, they list a bunch of other small presses that they respect and recommend. And I love publishers who so openly and generously champion the work of other small publishers. So definitely check Tilted Axis Press out. And another book that they've published recently, or they're about to publish, that honestly, it's the title that got me here. It's called To Hell with Poets, and I'm gonna struggle with the name here. It's by Bagul Sarmakova and translated from the Kazakh by Mirgul Kali. And this is a collection of short stories that are about the daily life in Kazakhstan. And they're described as vivid, hilarious, and unsettling. And this book won the 2023 English Pen Translates Award, which is a really significant milestone because, according to one source I found, very few Kazakh literary works have been translated into English. And this short story collection honestly sounds quite delightful, so definitely check it out. The shortlist for the UK Republic of Consciousness Prize will be announced on March 11th, and the winner will be announced on April 17th. As I mentioned, I am reading the long list for the US and Canada prize, and there's a great group of folks who are discussing both prizes over on Discord. And if you want to join us and be part of that conversation with absolutely no commitment to read any of the books at all, but you just want to chat with us about it, I will leave the link below for that Discord server. If you are watching this and you don't see the link below, just shoot me an email. I might have taken the link down by the time you're seeing this, but I'll leave it up for a few more days, and we're having a great time, and it's a great community of readers over there. So I hope you'll join us if you can. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Sarah, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.